my journey in terms of starting Earthbond, the company, starts with who I love and who I'm obsessed with, which are small, medium business owners. My father was a doctor, but didn't work in a hospital, started his own practice. And that was a lot of what I saw as, okay, this is entrepreneurship, not necessarily like the VC-backed Uber and Airbnb and Paystack and whatever, but really you build a business, you fund, your business with the profit, and you use that to support your family and your dreams, etc. And so even when I was in college, my thesis was on how uh, the success of small business owners is positively correlated with political stability and economic development. So it's been a recurring trend. But this is who I'm obsessed with. So when it came to wanting to start a business and even navigating through my career, it's been about what do businesses need and African business owners specifically need to be successful. So PwC put out this report, which I think they do every few years, but specifically in Nigeria. And the question was, what is the biggest challenge facing Nigerian SMEs, so small and medium business owners? And the top was obtaining finance. They also cited finding customers and infrastructure deficit and a number of other things as being a big challenge. But finance was huge. Now, when I first read this report back in 2020, which was when I started thinking about going down this path of entrepreneurship, I was like, great, we'll build a lending marketplace to close the financing gap. It's like $400 billion, perfect, done. But when you double click into that, right, into what it means for finance to be a hurdle, you also think about, okay, what do you need financing for? So what are your biggest costs in doing your business, right? What are you going to use this financing to do? And the top of the list is electricity and power generation. So businesses, SMEs are using, are spending 21% on energy generation, right? So whether it's a diesel generator, petrol generator, maybe they're in an estate or in a mall or plaza that runs a generator. Maybe they have a gas generator for a bigger entity, etc. But power is the biggest cost. And so when we looked at this and kept talking to SMEs, that was really how we got to this place of understanding, okay, it's not just financing and money or cash to these businesses, but it's about reducing what they have to spend cash on and understanding that energy and access to energy is very much limited by their finances, and their finances are very much limited by how much they're spending on energy. And this energy challenge is huge. So you kind of, as a market researcher, right, before you start a business, you're doing a bunch of interviews, you're doing a bunch of market research, you're just learning more about that customer, your target user, right, whoever you're obsessed with. And then you step back and look at the macro environment. So we looked at studies that said, okay, Nigeria, compared to other African countries, 54% are connected. That's actually not that bad compared to other countries that have no grid access. But what that 54% looks like is 6 to 8 hours of sporadic power loss. I mean, I don't have to necessarily explain it to any Nigerian, but that's sporadic power. So imagine trying to, run a hospital on that, run a factory, build any kind of productivity gains or efficiency. It's not possible. Nigerians as a whole are spending $22 billion on this. And so when you think about the size of the opportunity and the size of the problem, that's huge. Even in Western markets, that's huge. And so we talked more and more to these business owners and understanding, okay, what is your, like, how are you currently solving this? And have you looked at XYZ option? Have you looked at sharing power? Have you looked at, running things only when there's light, blah, blah, blah? Have you looked at solar? And so many business owners that we spoke to said, yeah, I think solar could work, but the cost is too high, or the amount of solar I need is too much, even if I can, do the light bulbs of Sun King and this and that. So that became very clear to us that this was an opportunity, and this really resonated with our customer base or our target users that we did care about, that we did want to solve for, that we did want to build for. And so we built the first iteration of Earthbond. So we're a one-stop shop for energy resilience. You can go into our site. We do an energy and financial audit for you right then and there to basically recommend a solar installation that could replace or reduce your generator reliance. We pre-qualify you for financing with a local currency denominated loan that's low cost, can be spread out up to 48 months. And then we generate a carbon baseline to generate carbon credits and further discount the cost of the cost of the installation. Our goal here is to combine this need for energy and this need for financing to make it much cheaper, not just to power your business, but much cheaper to run your business. And so all that is to say, and like we can go into questions about that later, but what steps that we took and that I took to building a business that really deeply resonates with the markets. So I put it into kind of like 5 key steps. And the 5th step is like to iterate. But the first piece is finding out who you're obsessed with. The second is to be a painkiller, not a vitamin. The third is finding what the status quo is. And then the fourth is building a lab, finding your lab rats. And finally, iterate. So you go through this process over and over again until it makes sense. I'm going to pause there first before we dive into that and ask if there's any questions about kind of the Earthbond story and journey. Okay, 1 second. So the first piece of finding out who or what you're obsessed with. The reality is if you're building a business, you are going to be involved in that business for at least the next 5 years, especially if you're building it from scratch. Whether you're going a VC-backed route, a grant, nonprofit-backed, or nonprofit focus, or even just like a stable, PE hopeful acquisition someday, right? You need to focus on something that is going to make you interested in this for the next 2 to 5 years, maybe 10 years, whatever it is. But you need to have an obsession with that. For me, it is small, medium business owners, and it is how to make them successful, right? That was clear. A lot of people look at our business and like, oh, it's climate tech, and like, Chidalu must be like a tree hugger and this. And like, I love the environment, don't get me wrong, but the reason that I decided to run a business focus in this space is because energy and clean energy is a solution for this market. So if you can, or for this target user, and so if you can identify who you care about and who will hold your attention for the next, couple of years and however long you think it's going to take to be successful, that is really going to anchor you and give you almost like a true north. Because I think a lot of the times there are trends, there are things that are going to make us, falter, are going to make us pivot, that are going to make us rethink how we're building. But if you can find an anchor and typically around a person is what I think is strongest, right? Around an archetype, around what kind of change you want to create and what you want a future to look like, that is key. The next piece is to be a painkiller and not a vitamin. I find this to be such a powerful statement. I don't even remember who, it's not an original by me, but someone had said this a long time ago when I was even just a product manager and thinking about, things like product market fit. But specifically in African markets and in places like Nigeria, where we are strapped for cash, when you think about what you want to create for someone, there are 2 options. You can create something that's a really beautiful, nice to have, right? I might build like, okay, like these are, I don't know, I don't want to insult anyone's business ideas, but I could build like, okay, great, signage that's prettier than current signage for business owners. I could build a business around water bottles or plates for companies that have nothing to do with that service. And it's nice and it's great. And a couple of people might really enjoy that. But if I can identify what keeps business owners up at night or users up at night, if I can understand what is it that they pay money to solve for, then I'm focusing on a painkiller, right? So the difference is if I can find something that is hurting them and resolving that, that is a more compelling story than finding something that they could genuinely like live without and is almost like an expenditure that doesn't bring them any real benefit, value, cost savings, or revenue increase. So here, the way that we really find the right problem is talking to as many of the people that you're obsessed with. I think, you know, for me as a politics major, it's very easy for me to like Google, like, okay, what are the trends on this? What are the numbers? What are the stats? What did this survey do or that? But the difference between being a researcher and thinking about a business and building a business is being able to go to where customers are and talking with them. When we started Earthbond, we talked to over 50 customers in the first month, and 50 business owners, sorry, within the first month, just to understand, right? Even before we came to the real concrete solution that solar is what we wanted to finance, it was just, how do you power your business? Why is it hard? What are the solutions you've decided to adopt? And we went from there. In general, I would even say you should talk to in tranches or in groups of 7. So talk to 7 business owners, asking them more or less the same question, get to an insight, and then move on to the next. I know that it's tempting to just send out a survey and get like yeses or nos, and to really get like this qualitative data and then be like X% and blah, blah, blah. That's helpful, but you won't know the story. You won't understand the behaviors. You won't understand the compelling factors. You won't understand even, okay, why the problem is so persistent, until you talk to customers. And once they tell you what is happening, asking them why. And that goes into my third point of like the 5 whys. So this is, I want to say McKinsey made this up, but I don't know as well. But there's this concept of like using the 5 whys. So you start with a question, and for us, it's why is energy so expensive for you? And they'll say, okay, because I need to run my I don't know, centrifuge if I'm like a medical lab. And I'll be like, okay, why? Okay, because most of our revenue comes from hospitals sending in these lab tests. Okay, and why is that? And then we keep going down this funnel to get to a core reason as to why energy is tied to your revenue generation and why you haven't been able to solve that problem. So I think finding the right problem and zoning in on that core problem will get you to what you want to solve for. And you, instead of starting with a solution, I know it's like a lot of times in the VC backed world, it's the things that get backed oftentimes are solutions, right? So it's AI, it's blockchain, and it's looking for like these solutions and then finding an application, right? That's a lot of times how people find investors' interest. But really, like investors' interest is going to come and go, but the market, their problems are what stays. So it's really important to start with the problem and then figure out the solution. And sometimes it's great. If AI could solve this and there's a huge AI boom, then you raise money and you solve it, great. But sometimes it's not the case. And I think you have to start with the problem and then find the solution tied to that. Okay. I think we're okay on time. The second piece is the status quo. So this goes back to, you started with the problem. A lot of times we want to be building in a completely wide open kind of like blue field space or green field space, right? And what that means is we expect that a customer or a user has a problem and they've just been waiting, doing nothing for your solution to come along and solve it all. That is typically not the case. Even if the solution is not a branded thing, they are doing something today. For us, the fact is of the matter is our problem in Nigeria is that the public grid is bad. It's too unstable for you to run your business sustainably, efficiently, and productively with. The status quo is generators, right? And so it's understanding that that is what your kind of core competition is, or for us, our core competition is in terms of helping people switch to solar, right? And it's understanding why is it that you use that solution? How long have you been using that solution? What would it take to pull you away from that solution? And really just like, what are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? All of that. So you really need to understand the status quo. It's also very important to understand what other solutions have been tried in the market, right? What other solutions have even been tried by your core user? So some people, right, they have tried solar, but they've only tried, so Sun King is a product that is instead of maybe being like a 5 kVA or 10 kVA solution, it's like a 500 watt panel battery setup with some light bulbs, which works to some extent, but there are drawbacks. And so it's really interesting to talk to customers and understand like, okay, this is your status quo. How much should you spend on that? Why wouldn't you spend more? Or why would you spend more? What would you need to get in order to spend more? So that gives you some context for both what your functional competition is, right? Not just what, the market reports are going to say, but really for an end user thinking, okay, I can continue down my happy path, this is what I'm used to and how I move, or I can switch my behavior. And I think it's really important to understand that users, humans, even those of us that are like, I'm such an innovator and I switch and move and I'm happy to change all the time, it's very hard to change behaviors. And so understanding the status quo is key to building a solution that can actually incentivize change and actually be rewarding for that end user. I don't even know, I think this is the fourth, is build a lab and find your lab rats. Before I used to just say like, okay, test, but I think it's really important to think about building your business in this way. And especially at this beginning of thinking of who are your lab rats going to be. That forces you to not build, number one, in a complete vacuum, right? Sometimes people iterate on ideas forever before even launching it to anyone, for anyone to test, for any kind of feedback from market, from real people. And that's really dangerous because if you only show it to your friends love you, your friends support you. They'll tell you the little things of like why they like it, why they don't. They aren't your target user. And they won't tell you why or why not they wouldn't pay money to use it. And they won't tell you why or why not they just wouldn't use it in general. Everything you do is meant to eventually become real. But at the same time, these are lab rats, not human beings. I know this is wrong, but they're lab rats, not human beings. So in the same way, scientists, like you're able to make mistakes with a lab rat, right? You're able to test something, get results, but you're not risking something huge. So when you're thinking about your market, you don't want to be in such a small market that you, by not getting something perfect with the first customer, you're going to ruin your brand, ruin your name, everything like that. It also teaches you what the size of your experiment should be. You don't need to launch something huge that's completely untested and ruin your brand and your name, but create like a closed pilot, right? For us, the first iteration of Earthbond was built on Bubble. We ran Facebook ads and probably reached maybe 1,000 people. There are 200 million people in Nigeria, so 1,000 people is not huge, even if I don't know, we weren't doing anything terrible, but like there were issues with our onboarding flow. There were issues with our site layout. There were issues with our color scheme and design. But what we were testing was just, will people give us information, right? Will people give us their contact information in order to learn more about how solar could help them? And the key was having a success metric, knowing what the number was of people that we wanted to hit, and not being, not letting perfect be the, enemy of good enough. And from there, it was very key to keep iterating, and I think that's the last one, over and over again until it makes sense. That's where we are today. So we've taken those initial tests and studies, learned how people go through the flow, learned what people are looking for when they ask for solar, what kind of information we can gather up front, what information we need to gather more in a hand-holding, safer way to build to the point that we're at. And we continue to iterate. We continue to test in small ways with new markets, but we don't let, analysis paralysis take hold. And no, there is a perfect way of doing everything. We don't need to be that perfect way to continue to create value for that end user. And again, to resonate with that end user. So I think all in all, my main thing that I want to leave you with is to not be afraid to test and be very bold in your ability to test with real people. Don't be worried. You will get things wrong, but again, it's not the Olympics. You will have many times to do this over and over again if you've chosen something with deep market resonance, because there's enough people, there's enough need, there's enough of a pain point for you to keep trying and for people to keep giving you opportunities to succeed.